dependence of women and lack of role or models for women writers. All these things have been a part of the lack of opportunities or have created the condition of lack of opportunities for women to publish books or write. In fact, for that matter, they even most of the times, many of the women did not or could not pursue the career of writing. And we have seen various conditions where Charlotte Bronte goes to Robert Southey, and Robert Southey suggests her when she asked for some suggestions to produce some literature. He suggests her directly that literature was not meant to be a woman's business. He clearly gives a blunt statement that a woman should be confined to wifely duties, right? And also we see, yet, in spite of these kind of challenges and prejudices by the society, women never gave up on writing. So, because publishing a book has been seen as a shameful act for women, women, as they could not get rid of their incurable disease, as Letitia Pilkington mentions, it's an incurable disease when somebody wants to write. So they have opted for alternative options such as writing diaries, journals, and letters to vent out their emotions. So we have seen in the next slide, I mentioned that about the anxiety of the author. What exactly anxiety of author? Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar introduces us with the concept of anxiety of authorship. So we see that male writers do have forefathers, and they have a fear as to get influenced by forefather writers and not being able to produce their own kind of literature. On the other hand, women completely suffer from the other side of the issue, that they do not have foremothers. There is no advocacy. There is no prior footsteps for them to follow. Therefore, women do not have any sort of opportunity to continue with literary models, because there are no literary for mothers. So these are a few things we discussed when it comes to anxiety of authorship. And we also have seen how Jane Austen's Persuasion comes up with a character, Annie Elliot, who says that the pen has been always in the male hands, and therefore literature has been written by men. So the narrative is also shaped by the thoughts of women, not by the women. And the women characters that have been portrayed in the different works of men have been a reflection of patriarchal thoughts and ways, is what she says through this character. And we also see that women's self-writing has a purpose and forms where they choose social restrictions, due to the social restrictions and all. They choose to write in diaries and journals where they can express their emotions and thoughts, and they can outlet their frustrations, loneliness, oppression, and then threat. When there is a threat of male dominance, yet they want to vent out their emotions and frustrations. They chose these means of literature as the outlets for vent out their emotions. So we also see one of the examples we see is Queen Victoria's diaries, where her personal struggles, emotions, and loneliness, in spite of being a ruler, she has all these things, and she mentions all these things in her diary. Similarly, Abba May Alcott, who's the mother of Louisa May Alcott, the famous writer, she says that she wrote a diary to express her anger and frustration. When we move ahead, and we see that also these diaries of women and journals of women have been the accounts of, the family history, and then they helped them to document the domestic life of people. One example we see is Hester Tarley's family book in 1766. It got published, and it records the details about their children growth, birthdays, and other things, and other milestones. Same way we see letter writing as a resistance. So they took the opportunity of writing, addressing their diaries to somebody, a safe space, creating imaginary figure, which turns out their safe space. So they are not offending anybody. It's an imaginary figure. So we see that Fanny Burney's work, Fanny Burney addresses in her diary somebody naming her as Miss Nobody, allowing her to write freely. And theoretical approach, when you look at for women's self-writing, we see that the language and the construction of self of male is different. So they say that self is shaped by language and society. And Cynthia Gannett argues that language can be both empowering as well as marginalizing women. So it is male writers, feminist theories challenge the traditional idea of self as a fixed entity. Right. And we see the shift from autobiography to life writing, where you see that great men whose autobiographies, whose lives were named as autobiographies when they have given accounts to their life elements. On the other hand, feminist scholars redefined this autobiographies as self-writing or life writing through the letters, diaries, and narratives. So one example we can take here is Marjorie Kemp's The Book of Marjorie Kemp, which is rediscovered in 1934. Now it is counted as or recognized as first autobiography in English written by a female writer. As we move ahead, we see that women autobiographies got the evolution in this way. So when you talk about male autobiographies, you name them as success stories. Because these autobiographies focus on careers and achievements of men. On the other hand, when you look at women's autobiographies or life writings, you see they are personal, they're fragmented, and they focus on relationships. Okay, example, if you want to look at Simone de Beauvoir's memoirs of a dutiful daughter, when you read, you realize that, it explores gender constraints and personal struggles within a patriarchal society. So it doesn't talk about what achievements did women get or what sort of goals could they achieve. That's not the main intention over there. The main intention of this particular work, or for that matter, any autobiography written by women, if you see they're personal, fragmented, and focused on relationships. And we move ahead and try to understand other principles of women's self-writing. We see women do not exclude other genders who are marginalized, basically. So you see African American, working class, and LGBTQ women autobiographies. Also, we see which were included in the feminist theories in the later point of time. Today, across women writing, you see that all these themes have become a part. And we see Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is an intersectional perspective. Intersectional as in not only it is a problem of female, but also intersectionally we see how it is connected to race, gender, and oppression. Various things come into picture. So women's self-writing also includes all these things. So as when we move ahead and see how do you theorize women's writing? You see Nancy Chodow's theory of ego development. When you look at the key idea in this is girls develop a sense of identity through their relationships with their mothers, and boys establish a separatedness and independence on the other hand. Right. And similarly, we also see that women's self-writing is more relational because of this particular reason that female have the sense of identity and men usually write on individualistic things. Okay, so that means feminist theories help us to see how gender shapes and how self is shaped in any women writing. And criticism on Chodow's theory is that it ignores cultural and racial differences. It essentializes women's experiences, assuming all women are inherently nurturing. Not really, people say, but the patterns, when you look at most of the time, the Chodow's theory of ego development definitely gets us to relate to things from our own lives. Similarly, Nancy K. Miller's critique, when you look at, men also write about relationships, not just women, she says, Nancy K. Miller. She critiques Chodoro's theory. And we also see that Nancy K. Miller's critique also says that a more inclusive approach is required, not simply coming up with basic things. Strict gender binaries also are required to be included, she says. So well, let's move ahead and see what is the conclusion of the first unit here, the evolution of women's self-writing. Okay, from exclusion to recognition. That means women's writing once upon a time was dismissed, but now it is a serious field of study. Similarly, language is a tool of power. So in Unit 1, we see that writing helps women to construct and reclaim their identities. And we also see that women writing includes gender binaries. So more scholars focus on not only women problems, but also most of the feminist writers focused on race, class, and sexuality. This is the conclusion of Unit 1. Now we are moving on to the key takeaways from the first ever unit. So early women writers faced social and institutional restrictions. Self-writing became a form of resistance. So therefore, they chose journals, letters, and diaries, which gave them a voice to vent out their emotions and their thoughts. And feminist theories reshaped how we view women autobiographies. So they gave the name to women autobiographies as life writing or self-writing. And we see that modern women writing challenges gender binaries and explore intersectional identities, like how we saw race and other related, sex and other related problems. So this is about Unit 1. As on we move to Unit 2, the introduction goes this way. When we see, let me just, yeah, Querelle des uh, feminists, which means the women question. The women question was a series of debates about women's rights, roles, and status in society during the 19th century. So this unit 2, is basically about the women question. How did they question? They question through various means. So to question something, if women come up with some questions, that should have some meaning. Why are they questioning anything? The question was about rights and roles. In 19th century, where women deprived of rights, social rights, they had to come up with certain debates on their rights and roles and their status in the society. They did not have vote power. So they believed that having power to vote would get them some attention, some political importance. Therefore, they also will be recognized as citizens, and their issues and problems are also going to be taken care of by the government, by the society. This is what they thought. So they came up with the idea of women question, which is an idea came from Renaissance debates. Okay, Renaissance had debates. So those debates actually gave them the idea that women also should question. So what did they question about women's rights, roles, and status in society? So these were a part of political and literary and social thought. And they talked mostly the issues that were discussed during these debates were about education, work, voting, social roles. And they sought recognition through these debates, and they sought some political voice, and they sought some equality in the society along with men. So this was about women question. And we see further, we see that this correlate is feminist, which is about the status of women between 1400 to 1789. So this term, the women question, had broad discussion over the topics including women's suffrage, education, and social and sexual liberation. What is sexual liberation? Like when women are forced to do when they are forced to do domesticity, then when they are forced to get married, when they're forced to do the take care of needs of men. All these things they wanted to discuss about, and they did. So these debates were on women's status, capabilities, and their education too. And they are against something called patriarchal domesticity and feudal thoughts. So women wanted a shift from these thoughts and this patriarchal domesticity. As on we move, we realize that the first feminist writer uh, who we look at is Christine D. Pisan. Christine D. Pisan, who was the person who authored the book The City of Women in 1404. The conceit of the book is a conversation between Christine and the three virtues. This is the first ever work by a feminist writer that has been recognized by the history. So we see that a woman talks with three virtues who are personified as women, namely reason, rectitude, and justice. It is a feminist argument. So, one by one, these three virtues demolish the principle of misogynist prejudice of the day. That means, for who is a misogynist? The one who is against, who hate women, who is against women. So, when these kind of prejudices are existing towards women, her three virtues, Christine, the character, who is talking with three virtues which are personified as woman, reason, rectitude, and justice. These three personified characteristics basically remove this misogynist prejudice from the minds of people through this book, which is written by Christian de Pizan. They critique misogyny in classical texts, they expose male bias in literature, they encourage education and intellectual autonomy for women. And we see Mary Wollstonecraft, who is the first person to talk about rights which are vindicated. A vindication of the rights of women is a work she came up with, where she was an English writer and a passionate advocate for educational and social equality for women. She called for the betterment of women's status through such political change as the radical reform of national and education systems. So she says that such change, the radical reformation or the change, would benefit all the society, she says. She concludes that it will benefit the society. So in this work, she says that it is a response for the French Revolution's discourse on citizenship. And French Revolution talks about male and their citizenship. She makes sure that even women also have the right to get the citizenship and political rights and voting capabilities and all these things. Therefore, she writes as a response to the French Revolution discourse on this citizenship. And she criticizes Rousseau's beliefs in women's natural subordination. When Rousseau talks about women's natural subordination or submissive nature, she talks about how she criticized that it is not, no women need to be a subordinate to a man, she says. So, with reference to this, Wollstonecraft argues that education is a means of independence, and she advocates that gender equality in marriage and society is definitely a needed reformation that needs to immediately come into the society as a radical thought. So we see that this age of domesticity and separate sphere, we consider this as age of domesticity and separate spheres, where the domestic public dichotomy describes the two spheres under separate sphere ideology. So let's see what exactly it is talking about. According to this ideology of domestic public dichotomy, women belong to domestic and private sphere, which is concerned with home and family. On the other hand, male belong to the public and economic sphere where they work outside the home. So this is a Victorian idol. What is the Victorian era when we see? We are looking at, okay, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't rename myself. Yeah, just give me 1 minute of time. I'm renaming. I'm sorry, it's semester. It's women's writings. Okay, I renamed, sir. Thank you for reminding me this. As on we move, I was sharing this. I see there is one person, Shabanya, is a part of this class.
Yeah, ma'am.
Shabanya, are you a student, dear?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay, okay. I hope I are going through the session.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for the response, dear. Let me share this once again. Now, there is some glitches going on here in my, I mean, network facility here. Therefore, if I miss something, I would definitely cover that in the upcoming session.
Yeah, ma'am.
I don't know. Sir, I am unable to share my PPT for whatever the reason. Can I have some help from BRAOU Hyderabad? Could you please help me so that I can share my PPT here? Because when I'm trying to open this, it is again directing me to. Can you see the screen, Shabanya?
Yeah, ma'am. I can
Oh,
see the screen,
okay.
ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for the response, dear. So as on we move to the age of domesticity and separate spheres, we see that the domestic public dichotomy describes these two spheres, where we saw that according to this ideology, women being in the domestic or private sphere, why which is concerned to home and family, while when men belong to the public and economic sphere, they only seem to have the work to do outside the home, not within the home. That means they seem to be not responsible for the work at home, according to this particular domestic public dichotomy. This is the Victorian era's ideology we see. However, what is a Victorian ideal? If you see, women, you can see that women as moral guardians at home, then men in public sphere, like in works and politics, uh, they are supposed to be in work and politics. Women are not allowed into those spheres, while women in private sphere, that is home, where men take it as a shame to help at home or at domesticity. So etiquettes, domestic skills, and charity used to define women's roles. On the other hand, the situation was an excuse come justification for women to get excluded from education and professional life. It is so unfortunate. Even today, if you see, the similar conditions are existing in some of the areas, if not across the world or across the nation or across the state. Definitely, this kind of situation is still existing. We can't deny with that. Right. Are today also expected to have the etiquette. They should have domestic skills. They should have the soft nature. They should have charity mind. But when it comes to political and public spheres, women are not given that kind of liberty. They have to face a lot of challenges in order to get into that, which is not a different even in Victorian era. In fact, we are continuing that Victorian era's model even in current conditions most of the time. Anyway, as on we move to the next part, in Victorian women, when they talk about marriage, property, and rights, so legal restrictions on women rights were always there. So they were not allowed to go and file a case against somebody, or go for some legal support, get some advocacy for their marital or property related issues, or about their rights, any sort of rights for that matter. And they had limited control over property and inheritance. Therefore, women independence on marriage for social security was very limited. So we see John Stuart Mill's The Subjection of Women in 1869, which argues about this kind of legal equality that women basically deserve. And we move forward and see The New Woman is one of the works that talks about changing gender roles. So late in 19th century movement, this is a late 19th century movement which rejects domestic ideals. Domestic ideals, as in the lady who is like a kind of I can say angel, who should work at home, who should be very soft in nature, support husband, support children, be very less educated, more domesticized. All these kind of, gender role is something that has been rejected by this particular new woman movement. So challenged double standards in marriage and sexuality. It also talked about independent, educated, and career-oriented women. You can see the example, Henrik Esben's A Doll's House in 1879, where Sarah Grant's writings such as A New Woman trilogy, which is followed by Heavenly Twins in 1893 and the Beth book 1897. These are a few books give us evidences that this new women movement always rejected domestic ideals. Okay, you can read the characters and understand how exactly it does. And Indian reform movements, when you look at it, talks about education and women rights. So Pandit Ramabai in India, she advocated women education, and she wrote the High Caste Hindu Women, where she talks about various Hindu women from the higher caste also who faces the problem. On the other hand, Savitri Bai Phule, she opened schools for lower caste girls, and she talks about women from lower castes and having troubles in lives, who faced double jeopardy, that means double punishment by the society. Women from a higher caste usually have certain problems like not being completely given education, but her problems are different from the women who are from lower caste, where these people not only deprived of education and rights, but also they have to face men's family in family, their own family men, downtrodden thoughts they have to face. So the problems that the higher caste Hindu women face are slightly different from the problems that lower caste women girls face. So these things were individually discussed by Pandita Ramabai in her works of Savitribai Phule's thoughts. And we see Rokenya Shakawat Hosseini, who writes Sultana's Dream, envisioning a female-led society, which is completely, I can say, you can say radical. It is completely radical. It talks about matriarchy and the utopian thoughts of women about a female-led society. So women for reformers challenged patriarchy and caste oppressions undoubtedly even in India through this Indian reform movements and which talks about education and women rights here. Okay, let's move on. My name is Kalpana Bharati, but you can call me as Bharati. So I'm taking you to a summary of unit right now. So what are the key themes in unit 2 you can study? Other than I'm giving a bird eye view, I can say it's not possible to entirely cover up the intricate details of the unit. I am giving you a very good overview of this. I would suggest you please go through the content from the textbook and study thoroughly in order to get good idea about it. So you see summary of unit 2 is debates on women rights evolved from early feminist ideas, and you see education and legal rights were central to reforms, and you see the challenges to patriarchal norms laid foundation for modern feminism. We also understand that rise of independent professional women in late 19th century. These are a few key themes and contributions we come across in Unit 2. Now we are moving to Unit 3, where in Unit 3, personal is political. The Unit 3 gives us a sense that personal is political. So historical fear of women in public spaces was evident at one point of time. So, but women definitely need to be in public and private spheres. In previous units, we have seen what challenges were there for women to publish their books or to vent out their frustrations or to express their emotions and thoughts. And in the other unit, we saw how women's domesticity was highlighted by men and how women deprived of their social rights, political rights, etc., how they fought for them. Now, in this unit, we are going to see the extension of personal being political, which where women, aspiring a role in public, not only in private sphere that is home, but also in public sphere that is in work and politics. So we see historically people fear if women come into public spaces. Why? You think of any king, always women had that veil over their heads in India. They should not show their faces. Even abroad, even in Western culture, they have to wear hats and all. They should not show in public most of the time. Very limited time they have to come into publics, and they are seen or showcased like property of the men. Right. So Elizabethan manuals linked public women with immortality. In fact, we see that Elizabethan manuals talking about these women who are in the public, they are immortal, they say. Okay, so that means we are looking at the thing that working outside home was viewed with suspicion. That means they are not sane, they are not holy, they are not very good in nature. These are the different kind of derogatory thoughts people used to have when women go into public. Even if you see no women in North India, you get to see without veil. Even today, when they go to temples and all, most of the time they wear veils over their heads. So these were restrictive laws right from the beginning. They are actually have become as a part of our social norms, social conditions. So restrictive laws limited women's economic independence. When women are not allowed to go outside, how will they earn money? How will they become economically independent? Therefore, they used to depend on their husbands. So Isabella Whitney, who is the first professional female writer of 16th century, writes about urban life. She dreamed about urban life, living in cities, living in towns, and how lovely the time would be. Her mindset always used to dream about urban life. So she faced discrimination as a working woman because of this. She was critiqued. She chose to critique gender and class inequalities. So her poetry most of the time offers a female perspective on London life. Okay, let's move on and see what exactly Afra Ben did. Afra Ben, who is an early female playwright and writer, she's one of the first women to earn a living through writing. So she faced criticism for writing openly about sexuality. She wrote Urunoko, which is one of the first anti-slavery novels, which you can't even imagine that at that time it could be written in that way. Even Virginia Woolf credited for her paving path to women writers. She was the one of the primary writers, female writers, who came up with all feministic theories and feministic thoughts and supported female writers, female education, female, mm, you know, growth in various spheres of life. So we move ahead and see that women's work in the Victorian era used to be limited in professions. Although some of the women tried to come out and they chose to work out of compulsion, out of no other go but to survive and get some livelihood, they were allowed to work in limited professions. In fact, women coming out and working itself used to be a big sin in Elizabethan era. At least in Victorian era, people tried to come, when women tried to come out and work, they had a very few limited professions such as governess, teacher, nurse, So these writings offered rare financial independence to women. Writing is a distinct thing. However, when they tried to write, it offered very, very limited financial independence. So, with middle class women's employment seen as improper. So, economic necessity force change in attitudes. So, eventually, they were allowed to work, but in limited professions. So, women's suffrage is a movement. In short form, it is NUWSS, but it is National Union of Women Suffrage Society, which organized peaceful legal campaigns for voting rights, which was conducted in 1897. Similarly, we also see WSPU, which is Women's Social and Political Union, the suffragettes. These are radical protests, hunger strikes, so they disrupted public meetings also, and they boycotted the census. You can see how much revolt women had to do in order to get basic rights for them. So we see that Emmeline Pankhurst led this militant suffrage movement where women gained the right to vote in stages. So immediately they did not get, but in 1918, some of the women got right to vote, and by 1929, most of the women got the right to vote. So this is called women's suffrage movement, where you can talk about two things. The one is NUWS, National Union for Women's Suffrage Society. The other one is WSPU, that is Women's Social and Political Union, the suffragettes. So we move on to how female writers actually supported all these movements and cultivated thoughts in people or instigated the thoughts in women in order to, progress in life in various spheres of life. So Virginia Woolf's Professions for Women talks about various things. One of it is women must kill the angel in the house to succeed. And she critiques the cultural barriers limiting women's career, creativity in this book. And she also argues for economic independence and self-expression for women. And she challenges, of writing honestly about female experiences. This book challenges uh, how female experiences are should be written honestly and how they are not being actually able, they're not being expressed by people honestly. So women writers in India, at the same time, in the contemporary times, women writers in India like Sarojini Naidu, Toru Dutt, Pandita Ramabai, what did they do? Sarojini Naidu, the first Indian woman to become governor, poet of nationalism. Then Toru Dutt writes in English, who writes on themes of love and mythology from the women's perspective. And Pandita Ramabai, who advocates female education, she criticizes patriarchal Hinduism in various works, journal writing, book writing, etc. So these are about Indian writers. Also, we will look at feminist fiction and social critique. Rokeya Shakawat Hussain, who writes A Sultana's Dream, a feminist utopia, where she imagines a world where women ruled and men were confined. So exactly it is the opposite side of the current scenario we have in the regular world. So she criticizes gender oppression in Muslim and Hindu traditions, and she uses satire to challenge social norms. We let us also see what exactly women's literature, how exactly women's literature becomes as a tool for social reform here. Okay, so we see that fiction, poetry, and essays helped to shape feminist discourses. And we see that they challenged patriarchal laws and traditions, and they promote education and economic independence and rights. We also see that these, works laid foundation for later feminist movements. So this here comes the end of the third unit. Second unit. Third unit, and also we get a summary of unit 3 while understanding the key lessons. Women fought restrictions in public and private spheres. Women became a key tool for feminist expression, and Indian women writers addressed caste and gender oppression, and suffrage movement led to gradual political rights. So this is about third unit. So with this, and tomorrow in our tomorrow's lesson, actually, we have another unit which I would like to take you through. But because I have network uncertainty, it is showing low network connectivity. I'm slightly worried whether I'll be able to continue after some time or not. In case there is a power cut also, I may not be able to continue. Therefore, although I want to continue with unit 4, I would prefer stopping here and take you through this next unit and next 3 units, which is block 2 in the next hour. That is tomorrow from 3 to 4. So unit 4 gives you the introduction to language and gender biases. So it talks about language reflecting power structures, how language has masculine terms which dominate linguistic norms. So we also see in Unit 4 that feminists are arguing about language perpetuating male superiority. So most of the time, if you all remember, men are at work, they say. Instead of saying people are at work, they say chairman instead of chairperson. Right. So these certain terminology that we use in current times completely shows how language is also becoming as a tool or has become a tool for patriarchal thoughts to perpetuate patriarchal thoughts. So these are masculine terms which should be replaced with gender neutral terms, right? So you can also say another example. He is a generic pronoun. Okay, okay. So you say men are social beings, people say. It is not men. It should be human beings. Human beings are social beings, not men alone. So this generic pronouns need to be removed. Male biased job titles should be removed. So in Unit 4, we see how language creates gender bias and how it is going to, how female writers dealt with such language and how they created different conditions through their own language. That is what we are going to look at in Unit 4. So with the kind of fear I have that I may lose my internet connectivity at this point of time, I would like to end this session here itself. And in the upcoming session, we are going to have Unit 4, Unit 5, and Unit 6 under the discussion, under the extensive discussion in order to understand, various aspects related to women writing. So, is if there are any questions or queries, I welcome students to ask me. So here you also, I just would like to continue with this one particular slide where you can see how male-centric language path to feminist critique. You can see Dallas Pender. Connect.